that than just trying to, make an hour work.
Well, just get the what's it, the hook and just pull me out if it's getting boring.
Nah. Well, with that, hello and welcome to issue 742 of Geek in the City Radio. I'm one of your hosts, Aron Duran.
And I'm your other host, Gable Hashtami.
And it's another month, which means we are once again joined by Anastasia Elfman. Woo! For another
Hello.
installment of Film
Hello.
Fever. I figured we didn't have to do the bio every single time.
Yeah, that saves some stress for me.
Yeah.
Figuring out what is it that I do. It's hard to define.
You're awesome. That's what you do.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
That can be a
With
thing.
with all your shiny new equipment.
I know, so fancy now. Now I'm
I
like a
know.
professional. Instead of playing one on TV.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be
Yeah.
awesome. Sorry.
And
Cable, you
this
can
month
vamp. I'm
we're
I'm doing posting stuff.
are you? I was just going to say
Yes.
that this is with Film Fever. We're going back to going on a deep dive into an older movie. In this particular case, you picked one for us called "The Old Dark House" from 1932, and it is a pre-code movie. And for those playing along at home, pre-code is referring to the Hays Code that kind of, I'm going to say, ruined movies,
Well,
but it
kinda.
didn't help. Kind of a lot. Like,
No. It it didn't help, you
I
know.
mean, it. I mean, it's not blacklisting. That wasn't great either.
No, which we might get to later because I do believe that happened to the director James Whale. I think he was blacklisted eventually.
Oh, was he?
He did
That
not hide
that
he did
tracks.
not hide his gayness. He did not hide it. And that did not go over well post Hayes Code.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So yeah.
But that can go. That can come later. Tonight we can just talk about the old dark house.
Yeah,
Ooh.
so we'll give a quick overview from it. So the Old Dark House is came out in 1932. So this is fresh off of Whale and Karloff's massive success with Frankenstein. And the kind of the quick synopsis of it is seeking shelter from a storm. Five travelers are in for a bizarre and terrifying night when they stumble upon the Femme family estate. And that's kind of it. It's a one night in a creepy house movie. I mean, there's more going on, but there's not a lot of set pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So it's so Anastasia, how do you feel? Like I mean, the movie just kind of throws you right into it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so it's one of my favorite of Wales horror films. This is one of, I guess, four, I think, technically of his like films that are considered like
Yeah, because
purely horror.
did he do The Invisible Man?
He did.
Okay, so yeah.
Yeah. Um, but to me, it's kind of like a dynamic dark comedy. And in many ways, I don't know, it kind of anticipates Whale's later picture of the Bride of Frankenstein. It's kind of lays the footprint for that for me and the
Mm-hmm.
dynamic like shots that he chooses. I mean, we can get into that stuff later, but coming from the fireplace and just all of these like sharp, quick edit and
The
like arty shots that he has,
yeah,
you
the
know.
biggest fireplace you'll ever see.
Yeah, you
It's
can
huge.
do some laps in there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I coveted that fireplace. But yeah, go ahead.
It's so gorgeous. I do too. We have like a little fireplace on our rooftop deck, and I wish it was that massive
Yeah,
to
exactly, for
take a
sure.
stroll in. But yeah, so to me it's kind of like an oddball kind of parody of horror. It's almost kind of campy in a way. because
Mm-hmm.
it's comedy, but then it gets like kind of dark. So it's for me, it's not one specific thing, but I love it.
Yeah, no, it does. It like it opens like a kind of traditional universal horror. Howling wind, really howling wind.
Mhm.
You open the door in the old dark house and you're hit with like lateral rain. I mean, just some of these people get soaked. And then it
Yeah,
kind
and
of
they're
has that
standing
vibe of,
5 feet inside the room. Yeah.
yeah, they just open a hose up on you. Which in a
So
way I feel
fun.
is Wales' way of saying like it's dangerous in this house, but it's even more dangerous out there.
Hmm.
Kind of thing. That was one of his themes that he would play with a lot in the future. Um, but it has that trope of like, okay, strangers, they go to a creepy house, the owner is odd, the butler is even odder, the maid slash house manager is a kind of a classic universal older woman, which is I don't know. It's easy to brush her off as being a pain in the butt, and you realize, oh no, she also kind of runs the show, kind of thing, you
Oh,
know.
she
But like,
definitely runs it. Like
oh yeah,
she has her brothers and kind of her dad under her thumb. She's
yeah,
running
Hmm.
things
we'll
completely.
definitely get into that, especially when you start to look at how she looks at was it Margaret?
Hmm.
Yeah, right? I'm trying to remember the younger
Yeah,
one.
because the first three visitors to the house are a married couple and their war veteran friend,
Right.
and that's Margaret and Philip Waverton, and then
Yeah, that's it.
Mr. Pendrell.
Yeah. We'll get into it later, but the way that she looks at Margaret is an interesting thing we'll touch on, I feel like. But it's that. It's like, okay, they're all around the dinner table and no one quite trusts it, and it's kind of weird, and like, oh, who's gonna die first is kind of the first vibe you kind of get if you don't know the movie. And then yeah, it kind of turns into a little bit of like camp.
Hmm.
Um,
A little
I
bit.
always think go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and there's this part that it takes a quick turn again of like, we're just gonna jump around a little bit. When we meet Porterhouse and they all kind of grill him for like, you just like money. It's very much a class thing where like the other characters are still kind of portrayed as like they're old money. They have money the way you're supposed to. You were born into it. And this guy fucking works and he hustles and he runs a factory. Gross. And he has this whole spiel about how like, yeah, I like money. I wish I did more with my life, but this is the life I've chosen. Also, my wife's dead.
Hmm.
My reason for joy is gone. All I have left is the money. And you're like, oh, you're not the fat jovial guy anymore. Like you have actual like pathos now. Like, God damn it, whale, quit doing this shit to us.
Yeah, the kind of depth that Whale sneaks into his characters, because you think that they're so superficial, half
Hmm.
of the time. And then we get into these, that's what I mean by like it's a comedy, but then we get to really, like you were saying, the pathos, we get to really become invested and care about these characters because they're sharing such like intimate secrets of themselves that we don't really get to see because they're all strangers to us as well, once we get introduced to them. And I think it's also interesting, it's like it kind of feels like the couple is possibly like newlywed, but it's like, why is
Hmm.
their friend with them? Like, what's going on? Nothing's ever discussed, like what they're going to or what's happening, and then the friend seems like he has possibly some gambling problems or something. It's just like all of this like odd information, it's very oddball. And then like when you
Yeah.
get into the other characters, like Lawton's his kind of not really girlfriend because it's more of a companion, but you want
Companion. Yeah.
to like a classic thing is like you want to judge her because she's so like not ditzy, but she's like kind of the life of the party, and she
Hmm.
talks about that, she's a dancer and everything like that. And so you kind of want to judge her, but then when you get into it, you actually see that what's her name, Margaret, that she's actually the more like kind of sexual one. Like we're seeing a
Yeah,
lot
a
of
lot.
interesting scenes with her. I mean, for the time period, we're talking 1932. She's like in her silks, her uh, all she's like stripping down in front of us, and that's kind
Hmm.
of
Yeah.
taboo, And so it's like you want to judge this younger woman. Well, they might even be the same age, but you want to judge the quote unquote like kind of floozy, but it's like her that is actually kind of oozing the sex appeal, So it's like it's interesting how Whale like puts dimension into these characters, and they're not just like one way.
Yeah. And it's like you bring up it's interesting the way you bring up Margaret because yeah, you're right. Gladys is the more excited one. In fact, she will randomly just dance and it throws people off. She'll be
Which I
talking and she'll just
love.
jump and she'll just jump up and go, and then she goes, "Oh, sorry." But Margaret's the one like every one of her movements I feel like is intentionally meant to be alluring to somebody. Even the way when she
Mhm.
leans against the wall, it's hello, look at like my entire form kind of thing.
Yeah, it's
Um,
very calculated. And also, like, just what she changes into is very interesting. Like, why would you change into like this silky evening gown when you're stranded at somebody's like house while it's pouring down, like
yeah,
like
and
does I
And,
don't know.
and you're not gonna, you don't, there's not even a bed for you to go sleep in.
No, and
no,
the sister makes sure, like, how many times does she say that? There's no beds,
There's no
yeah.
beds. No bags. No beds.
If you
Although
forgot,
No
there's
bags.
no beds.
although in a weird kind of way, like she has like this weird disdain for her. Oh, is it Rebecca Femme? Yeah.
Yes.
But like every chance she gets, she's like, no, no, but come with me. There's this thing about like you annoy me, and then you start to wonder, well, is it because you remember what you could have done and maybe family obligations prevented you? So now every chance she gets, when she's in front of people, she will berate Margaret. But whenever it's
Right.
just her and Margaret or her and Margaret and was it Gladys?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
She has a she's still goofy. She's still Rebecca Firm and that classic Universal older kind of wailing, woman archetype. But there's a few times, and we'll get to it, especially when Karloff's character is drunk and they're fighting him like crazy in the hall. And she's like, no, no, come with me. I'll take care of you. And I'm like,
I bet you will.
I bet you will. She'd be like, oh, I forgot there's one bed.
It's exactly one.
Yeah, just I guess you can come in here too, Gladys, but I prefer the blonde and the silk negligee kind of thing.
Exactly.
Hmm.
How
Yeah.
many spoilers are we getting into though?
It's 1932. We can spoil. It's not
You
like it's
think
Deadpool and Wolverine.
did they have time to watch? I don't
You know what? Yeah.
know.
I feel
Oh,
like we need to put a disclaimer on every Film Fever segment. There's going to be spoilers. I don't feel like we're ever going to
massive.
talk about this came out last
We
week
say
kind of
it's a
thing.
deep dive. That's what that kind of
That's true.
entails. It means
Yeah.
you're
Okay.
going to talk about the guts of the movie.
Oh, wait.
Okay.
Also, before we continue, I feel like we have to do this every time. What is your shirt this time?
My
Because
shirt?
you always have the cool
Oh,
shirts.
it's Killer Bob coming
Nice.
over the
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
couch. Yeah. I was
Okay.
like Killer Bob or Suspiria, and I couldn't get a Old Dark House shirt in time, so we went for Killer Bob.
I'm liking this new aspect of it. I was like, okay, what's the shirt? Cool.
I like it too. I like a good theme.
Yeah,
Like I like a good theme party, when there's like costumes and you have to dress a certain way.
that's
It's my
always
favorite.
fun.
Hmm.
Well, and since we're kind of on the topic of like gender and sexuality norms, which is something that like James Whale did not hide in his directing at all. I was thinking back again when you mentioned how Pendrell is the friend that travels with the Wavertons. Um, I mean, back then you wouldn't have seen it that way, but through more modern eyes, I'm like, that seems like a marriage of like an understanding because there are times where Pendrell is pretty close to Philip too. I mean, he's
Hmm.
really close to both of them. He acts more than a friend at times. Um,
I feel
and
like
and
part of that is also it's a picture of the times. Like
yeah,
gender roles were not what they keep telling us they were during that time period. I think.
right. Yeah. And then you could almost make a weird argument that once he meets Gladys and tells her he's going to marry her after an hour, um,
Hmm.
that's what I always love about these older movies. I'm going to marry you. Okay. Like they all have that. But then, like again, like
We
spoilers,
were all
once he
20 once.
yeah, when he declares his love for Gladys and he's gonna marry her and he tells Porterhouse, like, hey, old man, I hope you don't mind. I'm doing this. And Porterhouse is like, oh, that sucks, but happy for you, kind of thing. Because once again, I feel like even though Porterhouse is not seeing Gladys, she's a she's a place of joy in his life that doesn't revolve making money. And it's like, well, now that's being taken from me again.
Hmm.
Um, but the moment that Penderhouse declares his love for Gladys, implying that he will no longer be with the blah 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 the Wavertons,
Wavertons.
yeah, he's the only one that gets hurt and potentially killed by Karloff. It's like, oh, maybe I read into it too much, but I could see like through Whale's direction of like, no, you have broken up this unit, so the fates will now punish you for hurting them, and I'm going to
Oh,
use this
Hmm.
Karloff character.
how interesting. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like he turns it's like it's throughout the evening we kind of see him go from the friend and then they start chatting and sharing more information about themselves, and then you find out that like maybe he has a gambling problem. He's obviously had some, he's been in war and had some problems with that. His urge to get like to want to propose almost instantly is like
Mm-hmm.
like you were saying, kind of radical,
Yeah.
but classic, right? um but it's kind of like at the end, to me, it feels like he almost turns into the hero, which was when I first watched, was not expecting at all.
Right. It was also one of those moments where I don't know how the studio system operated then, if they did like rough cuts that had to be approved by higher ups, but I almost, and I've never read the book it's based on, so I don't know how true it is to the book or the short story. But I also kind of got that vibe that Penderhouse was not meant to survive. And they're like, well, look, he fought the monster and saved the girl. We can't kill him. So when she's wailing on him, have her be like, "Wait, I could sense it. He's alive still." And they're like, "All right, then we're gonna have him wake up from a coma or whatever." It's kind of a soap opera ending with that part.
So ahead
Mhm.
of their time.
Right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I feel like he was probably always meant to survive.
Really? Okay.
There is some, yeah. I'm not as familiar with Wales movies as both of you are, but it feels very much like based on the character that he was portraying, he was always going to be the hero. He was just meant to be subverted, um,
Okay.
because he had the troubled past, and I don't think they weren't really talking about PTSD in the 1930s, but that is precisely what he is going through,
Oh yeah.
which is
Yep.
why he proposes to a woman he just met within 12 hours.
Yes. I you know what? I could totally see that.
Yeah.
And not to sidebar too much, that is one of my favorite but never spoken of elements to the 1999 The Mummy
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
Evie's brother. He's like this like womanizing alcoholic, and he mentions a few times he was no problem chap, I was in the wall. And that's when you also realize that he's like an expert marksman and he drinks to forget. And you're like, oh no, he's got shell shock from World War I. We're just going to make him into a goofy character. Anyway, that's a whole.
Yeah.
But also that's a perfect example of how to do a remake of a classic horror film. It was so good, but I'm a
Yeah.
huge fan, and
I love it.
I love it. It's like a feel good movie, and I can watch it anytime.
That could have been the one that could
We,
have relaunched the Universal monsters for Universal.
yeah,
Like that
I
could
mean,
have
they
been a
it
keep
should
they
have.
springboard.
keep on trying to do it, and I wish they would just get it together. Let us handle it. We're fans. Come on.
Yeah,
We
right.
need to get
Yeah.
a
Don't
fan in there.
not that
A
horrible
couple of
Tom
years
Cruise
ago,
mummy. Boo.
yeah, we did a deep dive on the Mummy as a romantic comedy.
It so
Hmm.
is.
Mhm.
I mean, it's so many
Because it
things.
totally has that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I fell
Oh,
Um,
in
that
love
movie's
with
so good.
Rachel Weisz.
Everyone fell in love. I mean, it's become a cliche, but there's, sometimes things are cliches for a reason. Where 1999's The Mummy was pretty much like every bisexual's awakening if you were of a certain age. You're like, Rachel Weisz is gorgeous. Brendan Fraser's gorgeous. Oded Fair is gorgeous.
Everybody's a
Anoxanom.
gore.
Holy shit, everyone in this is gorgeous. What the
Yeah.
hell?
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway, that could, you know what,
Sorry,
maybe
it's a favorite.
maybe we'll
Yeah.
we'll we'll do that movie
No
for fun in a few
apologies.
months.
No
I'll just
We'll
apologies
toss
see.
needed.
I'll toss that on a new list and see if I can tempt you guys into doing that because the sequel is great too.
The sequel's great
Mhm.
too.
I
Tomb of the
love
Dragon
it.
Emperor, not so great, but also not horrible. The problem is that The Mummy and The Mummy Returns are so fucking good that Tomb of the Dragon Emperor is a perfectly serviceable mummy adventure movie. It's just not as good. And they lost Rachel Weisz, which
I
was a
was gonna
big hurt.
say that's the one that okay, because I don't think I even
Yeah,
got through it. Yeah, I was so angry. I
yeah,
was like, nobody's gonna
yeah,
explain this and just turn her into a different woman. Come on.
yeah.
Oh, that's right. It was Maria Bello. Yeah.
And she was fine, but you've got
Yeah,
used to,
no fault,
yeah,
but I mean, like I can't even compare to Rachel. Like we only want her.
yeah. No, I mean, I'm sure she
Yeah.
wouldn't like this comparison because it's kind of weird, but it's like when Shemp replaced Curly. I mean, Shemp is fine. There's nothing wrong with Shemp, and Shemp did the most of the Three Stooges shows as the third person, but it's not Curly, you know.
No, I mean, who can be Curly though?
No,
It's so
and then
such.
definitely not Curly Joe, the third one who replaced Shemp. I want to talk about Curly Joe.
Oh no, here we go. We're really deep diving.
No, I'm sorry. Let's get back
Mhm.
to the old dark house.
Um, I so this was my first time watching this movie, and
Mm,
what
Okay.
was funny to me is I felt as though I had seen it before by the time I got to the end of it, which I still haven't. But the model of the movie, or the story model,
mm-hmm.
was there is another movie from the 80s, 1983, called The House of the Long Shadows.
Hmm.
Ooh.
Hmm.
And it stars Vincent Price,
Okay.
Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, and Desi Arnaz Jr.
What?
What? I need to check this movie
It
out.
I think I need
it
to.
is it is not a great movie, but the premise is very similar, where it is strangers in an old Welsh house that is populated by a very strange family that have family secrets, including a locked up family member who's crazy. Spoilers. Um, but like, so I kept thinking, based on the name of the movie and the era that it came out, it's like I think this is a parody or satire of the old Dark House,
Mm.
which is weird because, like you point out, it in and of itself is also a comedy. It's just a horror comedy.
And what's really interesting is you can't call the old dark house a parody or a campy commentary on classic kind of haunted house, strangers in a creepy house story, because it's the first one.
Mm,
You could argue it's the first one, and Whale went out the gate being like, look, there's going to be more serious versions of this trope, but I'm James Whale, so it's going to be my version of the creepy old
yeah.
house with family secrets. Which, by the way, I'm going to cast a woman to play a burned and dying old man. But since I know even pre Hayes is going to piss people off, I'm going to credit him as a dude.
How
Yeah, that
insane
was
was
also
that?
weird.
It's so
Yeah.
weird because you hear that hello, you hear that very elderly feminine voice,
Hmm.
and then they get up there and I first see them, and the first thing I thought is like, that's pretty gutsy for that era to show an older woman that like hair is growing everywhere. And it wasn't until about 10 minutes later I'm like, oh no, that's supposed to be a guy.
She's the
Hmm.
dad.
She's the
Hmm.
dad. And yeah, so she's even, I mean, eventually it was fixed, but I think she's credited as John Dudger. Oh no, John Dudgeon.
Yeah.
So her name is Elsbeth Dudgeon.
Hmm.
She's credited in the movie as John Dudgeon. Um,
Interesting. Yeah.
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 Yeah, at first when I was watching this, I always thought that it was the sister, like just I don't know why, but like playing her dad, you
Hmm.
know? And then I was like,
Hmm.
okay, so it's just like played by some other actress. Why? But I feel like Whale is always like pushing the boundaries, you know, of
Hmm. For
what's
sure.
quote unquote acceptable with everything.
Which
But
would
all
get him in trouble eventually, but yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, everybody gets in trouble.
That's true.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so talking about like inspirations. So I was watching and I thought it was so funny that when the sister says like she's kind of berating the wife, and I forget her name, Margaret. Is that it?
Margaret.
Yeah.
Margaret,
So
Hmm.
yeah.
she's like berating her while she's just trying to get dressed out of, wet clothes. And she starts talking about like, okay, there used to be parties and they would bring their women and laughter and sin, laughter and sin. I was like, wait a second. That's a line from one of my other favorite horror comedies, Haunted
Oh, real?
Honeymoon.
So
And so I
Haunted
Oh,
was
Honeymoon took it from.
I think so. I mean, it's so like on the nose for me. I mean, I haven't done like a super deep. I mean, I'm a huge fan of this is one of my favorite Gene Wilder films personally. And then it's like, Young Frankenstein. But this is number one for me. I love it. But it was so funny to hear that because like Aunt Kate, Dom DeLuise ends up doing his big monologues and one of them is like laughter and sin, so I just thought that was pretty funny.
Man, I need to rewatch Haunted
And
Honeymoon
like an
because this
ode to it.
this could
hmm
be well, I mean, it makes sense because Gene Wilder was a huge fan of that era of horror movies and he directed Haunted Honeymoon.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, I mean
okay,
it's
I need to
it's
go back and
ob
rewatch that.
it's obviously like a parody and an ode to all of these like classic horror universal type horror films, like The
Hmm.
Haunted House and things like that. So I saw a lot of references to different ones, but it was so interesting to see a direct kind of like line taken from
Yeah.
because I just didn't put that connection together, you know. But anyways, that was fun for me to discover.
No, that's super cool. I need to go. That's a fun connection to make.
Yeah, and
Um,
and I got so I bought this one. It's not a very good I do not recommend, but I got it for the cover art because I love poster art. So it has like the original poster art, but I do not recommend getting it because it's such a bad scan and there's only like
oh,
two like one I think there's only one or two special features, which I'm like a special feature fiend. That's
yeah,
why I
yeah.
buy Blu-rays or DVDs. Like I want to listen to the commentary. Like I'm insane.
I want
But
all the background.
yeah, so I mean, it's from 1995, but it's not awesome. And so I had to like rewatch it on Prime, which, like I prefer physical, but it wasn't very good, so I had to rewatch it. Because I
And
couldn't
for
see
folks who,
it's
it was like the wrong aspect ratio where it was like zoomed in and people were cut off everywhere and I couldn't make it work. And so I was like, okay, like I gotta do the streaming, I guess. Because it's kind of hard to
right. It
find.
is.
so
I don't
It
know
it's
about
is
you.
currently on Tubi.
Okay.
So
which
yeah,
has a pretty decent transfer of it. It's not bad. And for
yeah.
those who
Okay.
know, Tubi's free. and you gotta. I mean, you can create an account, but Tubi is free.
Does
I
it have
also know
commercials though? Because I
it
It does
hate.
have
there
Yeah,
commercials.
see,
not many. I think there were 3 commercial breaks for the entire movie.
Mhm.
okay.
I do know because in some of my research, I don't know if you can still find it, maybe on Amazon. There was a 4K restoration on Blu-ray of the old Dark House.
Was it
Hmm.
zoned for here or was it foreign? Because I ran into a lot of that
Um,
problem too, trying to get like a new copy. It was
oh,
a
I
lot
don't
of foreign
know.
copies. But yeah, apparently this was out of print forever. And I get mixed like information. There was an interview on this one with one of Whale's friends, who said that he went to Universal and had them find a copy that he could scan and release. But then I
Right,
was also like different places were saying that William Castle for his remake had it brought back up. So I don't know who to believe, but you
huh?
know. But yeah, it's
So
kind
it
of
look.
hard to find still.
So I don't. Now I'm just doing a quick look. I don't see any mention of it being like for what zone it is, like North America, Europe, or Asia or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, you didn't hear this from me unless it's changed.
Uh-oh.
Um, PlayStation 5s do not have region encoding when it comes to movies.
Hmm.
Now, I don't know if that has changed with subsequent updates, but I still have a couple of UK. Well, I don't care. Like I have versions of UK of stuff that was done for the UK that never got released here in a Blu-ray, and they play on mine.
Oh, super cool. I guess
Yeah,
now I've got to get one.
the only thing you have to watch out for is if it's in PAL format, because that's an actual way of displaying the images and sound.
Mm,
But I'm looking, I think this says NTSC. Just deep diving on nerdy tech stuff in the background.
my fault. I asked.
No, I do that anyway. It's fine.
No,
Yeah,
no tracks on this
NTSC.
show.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, Although I feel like it's interesting. We've been going at this for half an hour and we haven't brought up Karloff once.
It's
Well, let's do it now.
Do it. Yeah, no.
yeah.
It it's
I know for me that was the weirdest thing about this is that Karloff, who is the top to build of this movie, is not like he is not the main character at any point. He is definitely the impending menace,
right.
but he doesn't even have dialogue.
No, and we're not even really told why he's the only that when he's drunk, he's dangerous.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I feel like everyone has that uncle in their family, but it's like it kind of builds. I mean, when you see him, because he's got that classic universal "I am the villain" look.
Hmm.
Um, but there's nothing supernatural about him. It's like oddly just tragic. And when he's had enough, he drinks too much, and when he gets out, he's self-loathing and violent.
Hmm.
Yeah, he's kind of like I don't know, I would say like he's an evil lurch, like from the Addams family. He's kind of evil,
Hmm.
Yeah, he has
lurch
no
type.
social cues at all. None.
No, no, but I thought it was interesting for Karloff because he carried a lot of his Frankenstein monster through to this character, with his eyes and his just the force that he was bringing and his like movement in his body. It felt like very Frankenstein
Hmm.
monster to me. And yeah, it's interesting because they don't go into like why he's a mute and like I almost feel like maybe the sister did something because she's trying to hide things, like why is he like this? And why do they keep him around also? But I guess it's to protect them from the pyromaniac older brother that they keep locked up on the third floor.
Right,
Hmm.
yeah.
I mean, I guess
Um,
you'll take your chances with Boozy Morgan.
yeah, if he gets too drunk, you can always just lock yourself in the room and let him rampage around, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, they're pretty calm about it too, because like they're having, they're having their dinner and drinking and everything like that, which is interesting because I'm totally turned off from what is it, their pickled onions that they're like constantly like trying to
I,
offer and eat. It was so disgusting.
yeah, I
Would
first thought
you
they were
like a
pickled
potato?
eggs. Oh
Oh
my
yeah,
God,
I'll take a potato.
that became my favorite line. Have a potato. Would you like a potato? Also, those
Yeah.
monsters, they
Have a
peeled the
potato.
potatoes. Half the
Right?
who takes the skin off a baked although it was I bet you it was just boiled within
British.
an inch of its life. Yeah, the
I mean,
British. They removed flavor. Ah,
we're
never.
on their way. Yeah, we're on their way to Wales, or they're in the Welsh countryside in the first place. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if
Um,
anything was very tasty there.
no, I
I
mean the
I'm
irony
not sure
being is that
anybody looked like they were really, except for what's her name, Rebecca, the sister. She was chowing down and she was really into very like tunnel vision into her food, which I thought was an interesting spark of like her character. She tunnel visions and she attacks, and not concerned
yeah.
about anything else.
Yeah, she's like a shark. It's one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Um, and that woman loves her pickled onions.
Oh.
it was also fascinating to watch her pass the bread around the table. It's like,
On the
what
fork,
is
just
this? Yeah. And it went all the way around and then back to her, and she put it on her plate. And I'm like, is that a thing? Is this something that they did at that time? This is so weird.
Yeah,
But it helped. Yeah.
I was gonna say I host a lot of dinner parties, and we haven't done that yet. But I was watching it. I was like, "Is this a fun thing to do? Should I like be more engaging with my guests and have them like pass a fork around or a
you
knife, whatever it
you
was?"
need to get like a super fancy like turkey or roast beef carving set, but just for your bread. Slice it and stab it, and then just pass it, and
Yeah,
then
no.
see who. Yeah,
In this
Who ends
economy,
up going,
yeah,
thanks, I'll put it on my plate. What do I do with the fork?
right.
bring it on
Um,
back.
it's kind of a weird thing, but that also eventually leads to one of my other favorite lines in the movie. It's after the dining table has been knocked over and it's a mess, and they're like, "Well, let's pick it up there." And I think it's Porterhouse that's like, "That's no way to treat a beef roast."
Oh my
Yep.
But
gosh.
that's no way to treat a beef roast.
Can we talk about the dining room table? I feel like that's an unsung hero of a character, that is like the focal point of a lot of those
Mm-hmm.
scenes, and I love when there's like shadow play and the fire, all of these
Hmm.
techniques. It was just so fun. I mean, it's on one hand, it was shot very much like a and set up very much like a stage play, but then we got
Mm-hmm.
into what I
Yep.
was saying, like the really dynamic shots coming through the fireplace, the play with the mirrors, the warped mirrors, kind of like showing
That was
that
cool.
some of the characters
Yeah,
are
that was.
actually the monsters, in my
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion. Um, but yeah, I
Yeah.
love that table. It's so good. And it's
Yeah,
like
and
It's
there's
a
brooding
good
in the
table.
background.
and it's always like you said, it's shot often with like that massive fireplace in the background, which is even more interesting when you realize that it's
Hmm.
also the home of like a pyro. So Wales, like, yeah, you can come out from the raging mother nature of howling wind and literal buckets of rain, but you're gonna do it at like the gates of hell. Like that's your choice. Deal with Mother Nature, who hates you, or come in here and take your chances with the crazy pyro family and the drunk butler who's got the power of
Hmm.
Frankenstein's monster. Have fun.
Tomato potato, as they say, right?
Yeah, that's right. Have a tomato. Have a potato.
But
Have a
how
potato.
how silly was that opening scene when they're in the car and it's like just pouring buckets, like you said, cats and dogs, and then they zoom in and he's talking about how he loves um getting water on the back of him, and they zoom in and it's literally like somebody pouring a bucket onto his hat and then
Hmm.
Yeah,
going into I thought that was so silly.
yeah,
But it's always like those light-hearted moments, and then it like changes,
yeah.
dramatically. Then all of a sudden there's a huge mudslide that, that was an insane shot,
Right.
Was that I was trying to figure out like it wasn't a blend of like tiny, sorry, words. I know that words work. It didn't feel like it was a miniature and then they merged the two scenes. That looked like that was on set and they just kind of bulldozed some mud.
Yeah, it
That
looked
was,
like it was a practical effect. I mean, I was trying to
yeah.
do some research. I mean, maybe somebody else knows more, which would be helpful. So please let me know. But it did look
Hmm.
like an actual like practical because it looked like there were actually people in there, which would be fair. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm not sure they were keeping actors or animals safe back then.
Oh,
No, and you
no.
can especially tell that during the fight scenes. I had that moment watching, and I'm like, they didn't have stunt people yet that I'm
No.
aware of. I'm like,
Yeah.
Karloff just threw himself down those stairs. I don't think they
Yes.
choreographed fights. I feel like Whale's like, and then the three of you struggle.
Yeah, and it's
Yep.
so interesting because Karlov ends up having really bad back issues for his whole
He
life,
does.
So and that like came from I don't remember if it was from Frankenstein or Bride of Frankenstein, but like
I
at
heard it
some
was from
point
I heard it
was
was
it
from Frankenstein when they made him wear those like the metal poles.
well that and there was like one scene like because I was watching a doc on him and there's well, like one scene in particular where Whale had him because he was mad at him. I think it was Frankenstein actually because just thinking about the whole doc. But Whale was mad at Karloff for like saying, or maybe it was Bride. It would make more sense, maybe Bride. But he was mad at him for saying something to the press about how Karloff didn't like in Frankenstein where the little girl like supposedly dies.
Hmm.
So he thought that that wasn't like a good choice. But so Whale had him carry an actual person up some hill, several like going take after take after take, and that ended up giving him a bunch of back problems. And so maybe it's not relevant to this film, but like when he's like carrying people and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, I was a little cautious. I was like, oh, he looks like he's doing okay, but I know that eventually he has some
Yeah.
problems that like haunt
And
him
he
his
was
whole life, and where he has to have surgeries and things like that, which is
yeah,
so
and he was a
sad.
and he was a big guy too. Everyone kind
Yeah.
of forgets like it's not just like how he was filmed. Like Karloff was a big guy,
You
you
know what's
know.
funny is I always assume people are much bigger in general, and then I find out that they're like tiny or something like that. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
I've always thought he was like a huge intimidating, maybe not with Frankenstein because I felt empathy for him, but with
Hmm.
Frankenstein monster, but with this one definitely as a woman, I can speak. I was very intimidated. I would not want to meet Morgan in an alley or something, like I would
Yeah.
cross the street if I was walking down the lane
Or in
with
an old
him.
dark house.
Or
Yeah.
yeah, I
And
mean,
again, he like has for being a butler, he has no social cues at all. Like the part like every time he's going to pour mainly the women water, he's like just like lurking behind them. And when
no,
they
it's
freak out, then he holds up the pitcher, he goes, and they're like, no, man.
like go
No.
away, please.
Or when he closes the door on Margaret, you just see the hand and you think that he's gonna like grab her, and it's like, no, just close the door. I
No,
mean,
and
he's being
I
yeah.
mean, he's the creeper. I'm totally like red flag. Okay, so he's worrisome. And then also, ironically, Rebecca the sister is total creeper vibes, like touching and
Hmm.
like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Please go.
The thing that cracks me up is when the movie starts, you're kind of given the expectation or you're kind of shown and you're implied to make the expectation that Horace Fem is going to be the weird one. And that's all because Ernest Thiesker just this is the prototype of what becomes Dr. Pretorius, but he's just
Hmm.
so fucking weird. Just the way he acts and the constant like, how do you do? It's this whole thing, and like he never like blinks. Have a potato, have a potato. And then he's just gone eventually. And in the morning he's like, good morning. He's
So
like, I'm
it
Like,
freaks you out that he's polite. He just
well,
wants to share potatoes.
yeah, well, he's like presented as like the classic, oh, you're gonna be the mad scientist, you're gonna be the cause of everything, and you find out no, he's just this poor, kind of like beaten down brother who's just trying to make the best of it. And when shit gets really weird, he's like going to bed.
Yeah,
I
he's
think
like,
that's
deuces, I'm out of here. Good luck.
yeah. I think that's a reversal, though. Like, you say he's the classic trope of this character, but it wasn't. That wasn't a trope then.
I guess that's true. Yeah, it doesn't come a trope until a couple movies later.
Yeah, he's
Yep.
defining the trope, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
right.
Yeah.
You know, but he's
Hmm.
fantastic. That guy has um that guy's got one of the best faces to shoot. Like every angle is just a winning
Yes.
angle. It's like a
Mhm.
lighting director and cinematographer's dream. Like, oh, we're gonna frame this guy. He's gonna look so good on camera.
Yeah. And how about that
He does.
makeup? I thought it was so good.
Mm-hmm.
He like just I don't know. I thought he looked terrific. Visually, he was one of my favorite characters, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Do they ever show who did the makeup on that?
Oh, I don't know.
Because it wouldn't have been what's his name? Oh my gosh, the Frankenstein makeup.
Oh, is it Jack Pierce?
Jack Pierce. I don't know. Now I gotta.
Oh, yeah. It says uncredited.
That
Poor guy.
was.
Yeah.
But he's
So that makes
uncredited.
sense. Yeah, well, it says uncredited. Both of it says Otto and then Jack Pierce.
Okay.
But no,
The
that makes
entire,
sense.
except for the writers, actors, and director, no one else is credited for this
I guess
movie.
that's true.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
back
in
when
the
credit
film.
sequences were like a page. It was like literally a
Yeah.
title card.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the makeup's just fantastic. Um, God, especially on Elsbeth Duck as Sir Roderick Fem. Like that's really good makeup on her.
Hmm.
Yeah, for it to translate from, physical to the film, they had to
hmm
be doing a lot of stuff
Yeah.
that, because half of it's being lost just because of, it's not HD.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And then something else that'd be kind of cool to touch on. I'm a big like film score nerd. Um, like Whale's the one who decided he did not want music for this movie, which I think lives at more of that vibe of like, no, you're more watching a play than a movie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
I didn't realize that until you mentioned that there's no score for this. I'm like, oh, that was what was so weird.
Yeah. Like I think it has an opening like da 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 da, and then it has an end song, but that's probably just a studio thing, you know.
yeah, I mean, it
Right.
was kind of out of the time as well. Like they didn't score every nuanced movement or try to like impinge on the audience like what feelings to feel, which I think, some not all the time, but sometimes I feel like scores are almost trying to spoon feed us emotions. It's like
Sure.
I would rather find it on my own.
Yeah.
But
Or they
yeah, I
try
mean,
too hard.
no, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it didn't feel empty to me. I felt like everything was full, because visually it was so, pleasing.
hmm
The set design, the lighting, the dramatic lighting, I should say, you could look at any of the rooms, just walking in and the staircase is so dramatically lit. Like we were saying, the table for me is its own character, the fireplace, so dramatic. Everything was. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of like just Dutch angles and before we had probably the term like the Dutch angles with the weird camera angles and stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
to unnerve the audience as they're watching. But yeah, it's one of those things you don't notice it until it's pointed out of like, oh yeah, there's no music to this, and it's still really holding me. You
Mhm.
know, I feel like if this were made a decade later, it would have had more music in it.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I'm not sure that it would have served it, but it's hard to judge without seeing that version, because it's like
Hmm.
a lot of times like score completely changes a scene, for good or bad.
Yeah.
So
Well, like
who's to say?
I can't imagine The Bride of Frankenstein without that amazing score. It is a character unto itself. You
Hmm.
know, the score of like The Bride of Frankenstein, but not so much, yeah, in the old dark house. It doesn't really need it. And I like what you said. It doesn't prepare the audience with an audio cue of like something's coming.
Yeah, yeah, it's like you're allowed to like kind of figure it out for yourself because it's almost like, I mean, it's it it completely makes sense. It's like almost every turn, every corner, you're not sure what you're gonna get, because
Yeah.
almost like through half of the film, I was waiting for somebody to jump out, like that the
Right.
brother was gonna escape, and all hell was gonna be released. And I thought it was so interesting that they're so concerned about him setting the place on fire, but to me it looks like it's all stone. So it's like, what are you
Right.
guys too like, are we
Yeah.
that
Also,
worried?
this
What are you gonna
fireplace
do?
is a giant open pit with a giant chimney. Like,
Yeah.
Right.
uh, yeah, it's really interesting. Um,
I I thought there was some subversion of type going on too when they did finally reveal Saul, the crazy pyromaniac brother.
right.
The actor himself was very slight and small and
Hmm.
visually non-threatening. And so when we finally see him, it's like, oh, that it's everyone else who's been a monster all along. It has been Karloff. Karloff has clearly been the monster the whole movie, and it wasn't. And you see that visual change in the actor when, like, he does his whole plea. Oh, I've been locked away. Everything is fine. It's fine. It's fine. And as soon as Pendrell turns his back, you see his face change to like, oh, there's the killer. Oh, great. Okay,
Yeah,
this got
and it's
creepy.
and it's great because you know, it's a horror movie with Karloff. He's going to you're just even though by then he'd only done one, the audience was
Hmm.
primed of like Karloff the Uncanny again. Oh, what's he going to be this time? And he is a monstrous looking character, and he has monstrous tendencies through his addiction issues. But it's Saul, the tiny,
Hmm.
unassuming one, which makes I feel like Karloff's character all the more tragic because when Saul dies, that devastates
Yeah.
um that just utterly devastates Karloff's character.
Yeah, which
Um
is crazy. I wasn't expecting that reaction at all.
it had been
I
so long
but
since I watched it, I forgot.
it's
Yeah.
kind of like a maybe a codependence situation going on.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's really rough and that's just a testament to how it's so cliche, but like Karloff can make you feel sad for a monster. Like you're always being like, quit being mean to Morgan, quit being mean to the creature. Like in my opinion, Karloff has only played one true villain, and that's for me, that's in The Mummy. I think his character in The Mummy knows exactly what he is, and he's pretty much unredeemable, kind of thing. But I
Yeah.
feel like every other character he's ever played is like, no, it's the world treated you like shit, and you were only given the option of being the monster because that's all they'd let you be, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Except when
completely.
he's Ardeth Bay, because Ardeth Bay is a straight up villain. Um, which this is kind of a see, you thought we wouldn't make it an hour. We've only got like
I
8 minutes left or something. I told
Okay.
you.
This is my only flaw, guys. I'm sorry. I always think that I'm not gonna have enough to chat about.
See, one day we'll get you to believe in yourself.
I do believe in myself. I just think that sometimes I might run out of stuff to say, but just
So,
kidding.
so I feel like well, even though we have maybe say 10 minutes left, hopefully we can kind of get into this just a little bit. So what do you guys both think, like considering that this movie, I think I put in the email, is bookended by Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein. This is a weird, like evolutionary bridging movie for Whale. And maybe even for like a lot of the cast too, because especially back then, studio players, you work for one studio, and Whale clearly had his favorites because they're all in The Bride, or a big chunk of them are in The Bride.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's almost like he's testing themes he wants to do later in this movie that'll have less pressure, even though there's pressure because it was Universal's next big horror. It had Karloff the Uncanny. I wonder if he had a vibe of like, yeah, but it's not Frankenstein. And I assume by then they already knew they were doing The Bride of Frankenstein. So I wonder if this is Whale being like, I'm gonna try some weird shit and see if I can get away with it, kind of stuff.
Yeah. T-
So yeah,
I mean, I don't know if I'll take this.
no, go for it. Yeah.
Um,
Please.
like what I was saying, I mean, in many ways, it's anticipates, Wales the later picture. I feel like he's like kind of testing the waters for certain subjects and also choosing, because I mean, Bride of Frankenstein, it's so beautifully shot. The lighting, what you were saying about the score, and just like the camera angles and the editing, everything. It's so beautiful. Um, but yeah, I feel like it's kind of testing the waters for that.
Hmm.
What are your guys' thoughts?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I would agree. It's him.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's him seeing what he can get away with, how far he can push it. And maybe he's just doing it for himself. Because part of me wonders like how savvy were studio heads back then to more subtle comments on gender and class systems. Because the novel is flat out meant to be a observation of the changing class system within England. It was a full-on commentary of that, and I feel like that's something Whale would have, would run with. Um, so maybe it was like to see if he thinks it works. Like, is this stuff worth exploring?
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, he not even like this might not have even been a choice, but to me, it's kind of like the prototype of a classic haunted house. Even though it's not haunted, it gives that vibe all the time. I'm waiting for like the other shoe to drop throughout the
right.
film. Like there's this sense of terror and dread, when they're like, I mean, there's so many moments, so I feel like it's one of those kind of like it tests with it tests with those kind of like motifs and of a haunted house horror film, but like this one has a twist and there's no ghosts, it's just human nature, it's just watching out for the older
Right.
brother.
Yeah, and part of it's human nature when a very rich family is never told no, kind of thing, and how they just
Oh
start to
yeah.
act when you're just
Yeah.
yeah, because it's implied that like they're an aristocratic family, which means they don't pay for that land anymore. They're incredibly wealthy. They
Mhm.
don't have to work. No one ever tells them, don't do that. That's not cool.
And
Makes them monstrous.
yeah, and not necessarily very kind. Like they weren't even gonna have them come in, and while they were seeking shelter in a horrific like storm, It was
Hmm.
Mhm.
insane that they were like almost gonna throw them out and
Yeah,
then
let the
not
peasants drown.
exactly and not offering them a bed. They have to stay up all night. It's just yeah, very
Only thing they were willing to give them was a fuck ton of potatoes
that's right.
and pickled eggs or pickled onions.
Pickled onions. Also, I mean, before we leave, I wanted to mention that it was interesting. So we've got the actor that plays Philip Waverton, the husband.
Hmm.
He
Mhm.
actually does a version of Karloff in Arsenic and Old Lace, where
Oh, really?
it was like the studio couldn't get Karloff, and so they got him to play the Karloff classic character in that, um,
Hmm.
film, and they actually make like jokes in the film. So I just thought that was kind of funny.
Oh, I'm gonna have to rewatch that. I never put that together.
Yeah,
That's
so
really cool.
it's, because Arsenic and Old Lace, that's in 1944, and so he
Mhm.
kind of plays the bad guy, but there's jokes about how he looks like Karloff, and because it comes from a stage play where Karloff played his character, so
Oh,
it was like
that's
very
right. Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. That's really cool.
I love that film
Fascinating.
too.
I haven't watched it in so long. I definitely
Well,
need to
that's
check it
on the
out.
list, so we should hit that one sometime.
All right, I think we'll check it out. We have to revisit the list. I like the idea how we do a more modern and an older, a modern and older. I think that's a fun
Yeah, I like
way
that
to bounce
too.
around.
I like that too. Because then it
Yeah.
opens up the audience, right?
Yeah.
Indeed.
Um, yeah, well, I think we're kind of wrapping up here. I had way more fun with the old Dark House than I thought I would. I knew I would enjoy it revisiting because I love all those. Because now I just want to jump. I want to watch the Black Cat. I want to watch the Raven. You know, I want to watch all the Universal horror ones that aren't attached to a theme park anymore because they're not the super popular ones. You know what I mean? I don't mean that as a dig. I, for one, can't wait to go to Florida next year, which I never thought I would say, to go to the Dark Universe setting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm assuming you know about that.
I might know a little bit about it.
Ooh, that sounds like someone who might know more. I'll have to bug you later.
Well, yeah, well, some family is doing some music for that, so I'll let you guess
Ooh.
Oh,
who.
really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Oh. Well, if they
All
need a
right.
podcast to kind of cover the opening of it,
Well, that's what I was thinking.
or just get us out there. I am
It sounds like you're
ridiculously.
going, so
I'm gonna go no matter what, but if I can go with more folks and anyway, don't get me started. It,
yeah, no, I know that's
I'm a
Yeah.
another whole
huge I'm
podcast.
a huge Disneyland fan, and not even Florida can, and like even Disney World, I'm like, I don't know, it's in Florida. We're making a theme park that's Universal Monsters. Well, fuck me, I'm going to Florida. kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, well,
Very
that'll be
Huh.
cool.
fun.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a more fun offline conversation can be had.
Yeah. So I think that's a
Yeah.
good spot for me to thank everyone for tuning in.
Hmm.
Anastasia, we'll have you, in a month again. We'll behind the scenes, we'll pick another movie and see, look, we're getting better at it,
We
which is pretty
are.
good. Yeah.
We're doing
With
great. We're
it's doing great.
amazing.
Yeah. Yes, we are.
That we are.
Well, with that all being said, I'm Arondaran.
I'm Cable Hafatani.
And I'm Anastasia Elfman.
You're getting that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks all for
Perfect.
listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Anastasia, we'll see you in a month. So thanks everybody. Bye, nerds.